Welcome back to Overhead Athletics. Today we're going to talk about bench pressing for pitchers and actually for all throwing athletes. We often see the bench press utilized to increase power output, increase strength in throwing athletes around the shoulder. We need to be skeptical whenever we see any exercise applied at a large scale. There's a lot of controversy around bench pressing and overhead pressing for throwers. We want to keep a few things in mind. Number one, as the elbow goes back, that begins to tensile load the front of the shoulder. And actually, it stretches the front of the shoulder in the same way that throwing does if it's done the wrong way. If the elbow goes up and then back, you're actually compounding that load. So it's going to load the front of the shoulder, and we want to potentially load the pec, and we want to potentially load the anterior deltoid and train those muscles. But we also have to keep in mind that when we look at electromyography, EMG, which is muscle activity profiles and sequences of elite level throwers, we see that they don't utilize their pec that much in the throw. 30% of their maximum voluntary isometric contraction, basically if you had them contract as hard as they could with their pec against a machine, tested that activity, and then looked at the throw, they only use 30% of that when they actually throw. Anterior deltoid, the front of the shoulder, that activity has been associated with glenohumeral instability or too much movement inside the socket and shoulder injuries. So we see these things and we say, okay, but the shoulder does internally rotate, it does come down and across. What does that? Well, if we look at the latissimus dorsi and our high level throwers, we see that they utilize their lat extreme amounts, maybe 120, 170% of what they could produce in the lab pulling down as compared to 30%. So the lat, the teres major back here, may be more important to train for the acceleration phase of the throw, and they actually wrap around just underneath those muscles to the front aspect of the humerus bone, the upper arm bone. While the lat, teres major, may be more important to train, the pec really doesn't do a whole heck of a lot in our elite level throwers. We want to make sure that if you're doing bench pressing, you're doing it right, which means you're never actually going behind the body. This is where the shoulder gets tensile loaded, and it's not really necessary because it never accesses that position in the throw. So outside of power lifters, really, we don't need to be training from way back here. So we advise a 90-degree eccentric isometric popularized by Joel Seidman, PhD down south, I want to say in Georgia. He's all over the internet, but he utilizes this with a lot of his NFL guys, pro football guys, and some of his professional baseball players. Down to about 90 degrees, everything stays activated, and then back up. And we'll show you that right now. If you grab your weights and you come back onto the bench, you're never going to end up in this bottom position. This actually stretches out the front of the shoulder and excessively loads the shoulder in a position that it'll never be in during the throw. Instead, we'll have our athletes stay up at approximately this angle. So from the top, everything's tight, core's tight, nice and slow to 90 degrees, no farther down. The elbows don't drop any farther down than the body. Hold, and then up powerfully. Nice and slow. Up. Another thing you'll notice is I don't flare my elbows out. So if I want to damage the front of the shoulder, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the arm back too far and take the elbows up too high. And that's what we see being done in a lot of the weight rooms across the country. So we avoid that with our bench press. And we also keep in mind, bench press, while it's a complex exercise and used a lot, maybe not the best exercise for throwing athletes. And really, the pec and the anterior deltoid are really not as important for internal rotation and the arm coming down and across as the latissimus dorsi, teres major are the two big muscles here. Keep that in mind next time you begin to put together your workout program.